Under the red glow of a dying sunset, Earth hung quiet and wounded, a blue world that once roared with the voices of billions, now whispering through broken cities and silent coasts. The Empire's occupation had stripped it bare, leaving only fragments of what humanity once was. But deep beneath the continental crust, in a forgotten chamber of steel and dust, something stirred back to life. A machine built not as a weapon, but as a promise. A prototype never meant to awaken, unless humanity had reached its final breath. They called it EXO-1 in the old archives. A hybrid of human intuition and alien engineering, created in the earliest days of contact. It was abandoned, sealed away when the Empire discovered its existence and declared it a threat to universal order. But humans, fragile and stubborn, hid it anyway. Buried it. Prayed they'd never need it. And now, centuries later, the final spark had triggered. EXO-1's core flared like a newborn star, and with a slow mechanical breath, the prototype remembered its purpose. Above ground, the Empire's orbital carriers swept the horizon, harvesting the last active human settlements. Their beams cut through the sky, silent and merciless. The survivors scattered through the ruins, clutching the remnants of their lives, knowing resistance was meaningless. Yet they kept running. Humans always ran until they learned to fight. A young signal analyst named Mara Vega stood alone on a shattered highway overlooking the burning coast. Her scanner hummed with encrypted pulses from beneath the surface, pulses she recognized as human-made but impossibly old. She wiped soot from her visor and tightened the strap of her worn-out respirator, feeling the wind vibrate with incoming carrier thrusters. Every instinct told her to hide. Instead, she stepped toward the strange subterranean signal. It felt like a heartbeat. The tremors began softly. Dust cascaded from broken highway beams. Then the ground split open like the world exhaling. A dome of black alloy rose through layers of stone, glowing with cobalt veins. Mara stumbled backward, breath caught in her throat, as the structure unfolded into a towering frame, humanoid. Elegant, impossibly advanced. The prototype's eyes opened, twin spheres of incandescent gold, scanning a world in ruins. The Empire noticed. Dozens of carrier drones shifted direction, angling toward the anomaly with surgical precision. Their weapons lit up the sky, painting crimson streaks across the clouds. Mara dove behind an overturned mag truck as the first volley struck the ground where she had stood. The prototype didn't move. It simply looked at the descending fire, as though recognizing an old adversary. Then, with a smoothness that defied its size, EXO-1 raised an arm and released a pulse, silent, pure, blinding. The drones froze midair. Their engines flickered. And one by one, they collapsed like dying stars, crashing into the ocean with thunderous plumes. Mara stared, stunned, realizing she was witnessing something humanity had forgotten it ever created. Something the Empire had feared enough to bury under lies. The prototype turned its golden gaze toward her. Not hostile. Not mechanical. Curious. As if searching for a familiar echo in the last surviving daughter of Earth. She swallowed hard, heart racing, as the machine bent down slightly, acknowledging her existence with a gesture too human to be accidental. Far above them, the Empire's flagship shifted course. Its shadow crawled across the continent like a black eclipse. They had felt the pulse. They had recognized the signature. And fear, real, sudden fear, spread through a civilization that had dominated the galaxy for 10,000 years. EXO-1 straightened, its core brightening with a rising hum that resonated through the cracked earth. Mara felt the tremor in her bones. She didn't know whether humanity had just been saved, or whether the last machine ever built by human hands was about to ignite the final war. The wind stilled. The ocean quieted. And in the silence, the prototype spoke, not with words, but with a low, resonant tone that carried purpose, memory, and something dangerously close to sorrow. Humanity was not done. The prototype stepped forward, each stride shaking loose centuries of dust from its armored frame. Its golden eyes dimmed and brightened in rhythmic pulses, scanning the coast, the sky, the incoming threat. Mara felt the resonance ripple through her chest as if the machine's heartbeat was trying to sync with her own. She pushed herself up from behind the overturned mag truck, breath uneven, knowing she was standing in the presence of something built to carry humanity's final hope. Or its final sin. Above, the Empire's flagship descended through the cloud cover. It looked less like a ship and more like a continent carved into the shape of a predator, bladed wings, monolithic engines, a core reactor that glowed with the stolen energy of 1,000 conquered worlds. Its arrival bent the winds and churned the air into violent spirals. Even from miles away, Mara felt the gravity wells at its prow tug against her bones. EXO-1 lifted its head, silently acknowledging the Titan in the sky. Then something unexpected happened. A rain of metallic spheres detached from the flagship's underbelly, falling like silver comets. They halted midair, unfolded into angular shapes, and ignited with a blue-white fire. Hunter-class Reavers, automated assassins designed for one purpose: destroy impossibilities. The Empire unleashed hundreds. Mara staggered backward as the swarm spread across the sky. Their synchronized cry, a screech of bending metal and charging plasma, pierced the air like a storm of razors. She knew this sound from archived battle logs. Entire colonies had fallen after hearing it once, but the prototype didn't flinch. Instead, the black alloy plates on its forearms opened, revealing intricate conduits that pulsed with current. Light spread through its limbs like veins awakening. A slow exhale, not mechanical, but disturbingly similar to breath, left its body, and the air around it shifted, warming with the promise of impossible energy. The Reaver's dove. Mara barely had time to cover her head before the sky tore open in a cascade of plasma lances and kinetic bursts. Dozens targeted EXO-1 directly, while the rest swept low, scanning for human survivors to eliminate. Mara's visor lit up with hundreds of lethal signatures converging on her position. She pressed herself against the truck, bracing for the inevitable. EXO-1 vanished, in a single motion, too fast for her eyes to track, too fluid to belong to a machine. The prototype leapt into the swarm. Shock waves rippled outward as it intercepted the first Reaver mid-dive, crushing its core with a burst of electromagnetic force. Streaks of cobalt light carved arcs across the sky as EXO-1 ricocheted between enemies, dismantling them with inhuman precision. Reavers exploded in blinding flashes, lighting the coast like a strobing battlefield, yet the swarm was endless. Dozens converged, latching onto EXO-1's armor, drilling into its joints with molecular blades. The prototype faltered under the weight of so many assault vectors. Its golden eyes flickered. Its frame sparked. The Reavers screeched victoriously, tightening their grip. Mara felt helpless watching it happen. She had no weapon, no authority, no place in a war this massive. But humanity had never needed permission to act. She sprinted across the rubble, sliding to a stop near a fractured energy node humming weakly. Power cells, Empire tech, scattered across the beach from a destroyed drone transport. She snatched one up, its contents unstable, volatile, lethal. She didn't think. She just ran. She climbed a shattered pillar of rebar and concrete, raised the malfunctioning power cell above her head, and hurled it with every remaining ounce of strength toward the cluster of Reavers clinging to EXO-1. Time froze for an instant, just long enough for Mara to wonder if she had just thrown her life into oblivion. The power cell detonated. The explosion ripped through the swarm, scattering Reavers like burning shards of metal. EXO-1 staggered from the blast but tore the remaining machines from its frame. For a moment, Mara thought she saw something in its golden eyes, a flicker of acknowledgement. Almost gratitude, but the Empire was far from finished. The flagship's dorsal cannons rotated, glowing with the light of planetary-class weaponry. The sky turned white. Wind roared. The ocean recoiled from the coast. Mara shielded her face as the carrier aimed directly at the prototype, and the human who dared to help it. But EXO-1 wasn't running anymore. It stepped forward, core blazing like a miniature sun. Lines of ancient human engineering crackled to life across its body, revealing inscriptions long erased from human history. It raised its arms toward the descending death beam, and the world trembled as power surged through its frame, and then, for the first time, EXO-1 spoke, not in tones or pulses, but in a voice woven from human memory and machine resonance. "You are not welcome here." The sky shattered, the beam struck with the fury of a collapsing star, a column of annihilating light wide enough to vaporize a city. It roared downward from the Empire's flagship, carving the atmosphere into spiraling shockwaves that turned clouds into ribbons of fire. The earth beneath Mara's feet cracked open, molten fissures glowing through the broken coastline as the blast consumed everything in its path. But EXO-1 didn't move. The prototype held its ground, arms braced forward, core radiating a shield that warped the incoming beam around its body like a river forced to bend around a stone. The energy tore at its armor, stripping layers of alloy like burning petals. Its golden eyes dimmed to narrow slits as the strain pushed its systems toward collapse. Yet its stance never faltered. Not for an instant, Mara watched in awe, clinging to a twisted beam jutting from the ruins. Even with her visor darkened to maximum, the light was nearly blinding. She felt the pressure in her chest, an invisible weight crushing her ribs, squeezing the breath from her lungs. Every instinct screamed that nothing born of matter could withstand a weapon meant to erase planets. But humanity had never been good at obeying limits. EXO-1's core surged brighter and brighter until its glow pierced the whiteout of the beam. The shield it emitted thickened, folding space, channeling the energy upward in spiraling arcs. The ocean churned into steam. Buildings collapsed in waves. Yet the prototype kept forcing the blast away from the coast, refusing to let Earth take another wound. The flagship's cannon strained, overheating, metals warping from the sheer output. The Empire had used this beam to erase civilizations before. It had erased memories older than Earth itself. But now, for the first time in its reign, it met something it could not destroy. Then the beam flickered, once, twice, and died. The sudden silence felt wrong, almost unreal. Wind rushed in to fill the void. Dust rained from the sky. Mara's ears rang with the lingering echo of power unimaginable. In the distance, the flagship drifted unsteadily, smoke rising from its scorched cannons. Systems across its hull sparked out. Panic signals rippled through its formation. EXO-1 lowered its arms, parts of its armor glowed red-hot. Segments had cracked, exposing conduits of shimmering silver light beneath. But its posture remained proud, upright, unwavering, defiant. For a moment, Mara simply stared. Humanity had built this thing. This miracle. A machine with the soul of a species in its circuitry. Something capable not only of resisting impossible force, but returning it. And then she noticed something new. Not far from the flagship, space rippled. A tear opened, like reality itself was peeling back. Through it emerged an Imperial Oracle-class dreadnought, a vessel older than the Empire's own recorded history, shaped like a crescent of obsidian and starlight. Its hull bore runes that twisted as they were looked at. Its presence alone seemed to drain the warmth from the air. The Empire had sent a god machine. Mara felt a chill race through her spine. She'd read about Oracle-class vessels, ships that could rewrite gravitational fields, collapse moons, manipulate quantum variants like clay. They were said to be crewed by the Ascendant, the Empire's most elite telemetric commanders, linked into a single consciousness. Entire rebellions had been crushed at the sight of one. EXO-1 lifted its gaze toward the new arrival. For the first time, its golden light flickered with hesitation. The dreadnought unleashed its voice, a chorus of layered, metallic tones that reverberated across the coastline, crushing sand into glass. It wasn't speech in any human sense. It was a command, a verdict, a sentence passed across dimensions. Surrender the anomaly. EXO-1's core dimmed. Then brightened again with a slow, rising hum, as if gathering every memory humanity ever gave it. Mara stepped closer, almost instinctively, her voice trembling. "You don't have to stand alone," she whispered, though she doubted it could hear her through the storm of energies gathering around them. But EXO-1 turned, actually turned, to look at her. In its eyes she saw not calculation, but something like recognition. Something like trust. The dreadnought charged its cosmic lances, space bent inward, forming spears of collapsing gravity. The ground heaved. Oceans recoiled. Stars above flickered as their paths were distorted. EXO-1 stepped in front of Mara. Shielding her completely with its damaged body, the spears launched, but this time, the prototype didn't brace. Instead, it leapt. The world blurred as EXO-1 launched itself skyward, breaking the sound barrier so violently the coastline split into rolling quakes. Mara shielded her face as the shock wave tore past her, lifting sand and steel into the air. The prototype shot upward, leaving behind a trail of crackling ion light that spiraled like a comet tail. It met the first gravity spear midair, slicing it apart with a burst of antimatter discharge. The second spear curved unnaturally, pursuing it like a predator. But EXO-1 twisted through the sky, bending physics with a maneuver impossible for anything made of matter. The dreadnought adjusted its aim. Space twisted again, and so began a duel that should never have existed, human invention against cosmic tyranny, a forgotten prototype against a vessel that ruled stars. Mara watched as the night lit up like a war of gods, and deep inside she felt something awaken, something that belonged not to her alone, but to all of humanity, hope. The sky became a theater of impossible light as EXO-1 spiraled upward toward the Oracle-class dreadnought, weaving through collapsing gravity fields that twisted the clouds into spirals of ash and fire. Every movement the prototype made sent ripples through the atmosphere, bending wind currents and shattering pockets of unstable air. The dreadnought answered with cosmic precision, releasing volleys of gravitational lances that tore holes in space itself. Each lance cracked open brief windows into darkness, void scars that swallowed sound and light before sealing shut again. EXO-1 dodged the first barrage, then the second, then the third. The fourth clipped its shoulder, ripping an entire armor plate away and sending it tumbling in a spiral of sparks. The prototype corrected its path instantly, stabilizing with a pulse of luminous energy from its core. It shot forward at a speed that blurred it into a streak of gold and cobalt, closing the distance to the dreadnought with silent, relentless purpose. The dreadnought responded by expanding its event field. An invisible sphere that distorted the winds and churned the clouds. When EXO-1 struck it, the air rippled like water meeting stone. The sudden resistance halted the prototype's momentum, suspending it midair as gravitational waveforms pressed against it from every direction. Its limbs strained, its joints grinding under the pressure. Even from the ruined coastline far below, Mara could feel the air tighten around her chest as though the dreadnought's power sought to crush everything that breathed. EXO-1's core flared brighter, pushing back. Veins of white fire spread across its frame, burning through damaged panels and igniting the air around it. With a violent surge, it shattered the event field, sending shockwaves spiraling across the sky. The dreadnought listed to the side, its runes flickering like dying embers. And for the first time, the Empire's ancient warship showed weakness. The prototype seized the opening. It accelerated again, this time straight toward the dreadnought's exposed flank. A ring of electromagnetic light formed around its fist as it drew back its arm. The impact landed with a detonation that echoed across continents. Sections of the dreadnought's hull fractured outward, erupting into shards of obsidian metal that fell like meteors into the burning sea. The dreadnought roared, not in sound, but in a telepathic quake that rattled minds across the planet. Its remaining cannons aligned instantly and unleashed a barrage of quantum destabilizers. Pulses of white light streaked through the sky, each one capable of unraveling molecular structure on contact. EXO-1 twisted through the storm, deflecting two pulses with its hands, absorbing another into its already damaged chest. The fourth struck full force. The blast hurled the prototype downward in a spiral of blazing fragments, trailing arcs of molten metal as it fell like a broken star. Mara watched the descent with breath trapped in her throat. The prototype hit the ocean with a shock so violent the water split apart, sending towering walls of steam billowing into the atmosphere. Waves taller than city ruins crashed against the shore, sweeping debris and shattered steel inland. Silence followed, a heavy, suffocating silence that felt like defeat settling over the ruins of Earth. The dreadnought descended lower, preparing its final strike. Its core opened like a cosmic iris, exposing a singularity engine capable of disintegrating continents. Runes glowed. Gravity warped. The ocean churned as if struggling to escape its pull. Mara stumbled backward as the coastline groaned beneath her feet. Beneath the boiling water, a glow pulsed. Once, twice, a third time, brighter than before, light erupted from the sea as EXO-1 rose again, ascending slowly at first, like something lifting itself from the weight of the world. Its armor was shattered. Limbs fractured. Entire segments of its frame glowed with raw internal energy exposed to the air. But its core, its impossible, furious, human core, burned brighter than the singularity descending toward it. The dreadnought unleashed its annihilation wave, EXO-1 countered by channeling every remaining ounce of its power, spreading its arms as though embracing the storm. A sphere of radiant energy expanded from its chest, pushing against the tidal pull of the singularity. The air screamed. The ocean rose into spiraling columns. Cracks webbed across the ground, glowing with molten fire. The wave met the sphere, the world held its breath. The impact detonated the sky, turning everything white, and in the blinding haze, something began to break, something ancient, colossal, and imperial. The dreadnought's runes flickered, cracked, and then shattered like glass. The Empire's god machine was dying. The dreadnought's death throes rippled across the sky in waves of collapsing reality. Its runes fractured into drifting shards of broken starlight, each shard dissolving into dust before reaching the ocean below. The singularity engine at its core sputtered, flickering between dimensions, destabilizing everything it touched. Space folded inward around the dying vessel, creating spirals of warped constellations that stretched and snapped like threads pulled too tight. EXO-1 hovered at the heart of the chaos, held aloft by sheer force of will and a core burning hotter than anything humanity had ever engineered. Its body was falling apart piece by piece, armor plates splitting, joints sparking, exposed conduits melting into glowing lines of silver. But it continued pushing, stabilizing the collapsing wave, caging the singularity's fury inside its sphere of light. Far below, Mara watched through rising dust and steam, unable to comprehend how something so broken could still rise. The shock waves hammered the coastline, flattening ruins, ripping steel frames from the earth, sending churning tides crashing inland. Yet she stood her ground, shielding her eyes. Refusing to look away from the lone guardian in the storm, the dreadnought struggled to regenerate its runes, but each new symbol flickered weakly, then died. Its ancient consciousness, a collective mind forged from centuries of imperial telemancers, began to splinter under the pressure. Echoes of their fading thoughts spilled into the atmosphere, a chorus of disbelief, denial, and fear. They had predicted every rebellion before it began. They had crushed every uprising with a single thought. But they had never faced a human creation built to defy the impossible. The singularity pulsed, then cracked like an egg under EXO-1's counterforce. Light spilled out in fractal patterns, spiraling around the prototype like molten wings. With one final surge, EXO-1 pushed outward with its entire being. The sphere expanded, swallowing the singularity's collapsing core. The dreadnought convulsed, its wings folding inward as gravitational distortions twisted its structure into impossible angles. Then it imploded. The blast was silent at first, a flash of white that consumed the sky, but the sound came a moment later, a deep, thunderous roar that rolled across oceans and continents. The dreadnought vanished in a collapsing bubble of warped light. Waves like mountains exploded outward. The air turned to smoke. The clouds scattered as if blown apart by the breath of a god. EXO-1 was flung from the center of the implosion like debris from a supernova. Its shattered body tumbled through the smoke-filled sky, limbs trailing sparks and fragments. It fell in a broken arc toward the coast, landing in a crater of molten sand and splintered earth. Mara sprinted toward the impact site without hesitation. Every footstep burned from the heat seeping through the ground, every breath choked by ash and metallic dust. She slid down the edge of the crater, coughing, shielding her eyes from the glowing debris. When she reached the bottom, she found EXO-1 lying in a pool of cooling alloy, its movements faint, its golden eyes reduced to soft embers. She approached slowly, her voice trembling. "You're still here." The prototype turned its head slightly. The motion strained, fractured. Lines of code flickered across the exposed conduits in its chest, but beneath the machine's fading pulses she felt something deeper, an echo of humanity, a resonance of intention built into its core. The sky above rumbled as the Empire's remaining fleet repositioned. Smaller carriers and war platforms began forming a defensive ring, broadcasting orders in encrypted bursts. They had lost a god machine. They were reacting with panic. With desperation. And with something else, fear powerful enough to fracture their discipline. Mara looked up at the circling ships, then back at the broken prototype. "They're regrouping," she whispered. "They're not done." EXO-1's core flickered weakly. Its arm twitched, reaching toward the sky as if trying to rise again. But its structure failed, collapsing back into the scorched sand. Mara stepped closer, placing her hand against the warm metal of its frame. "You can't fight them alone anymore," she said softly. "But maybe you don't have to." The fleet above spread out in formation, preparing a full planetary purge. Engines ignited. Cannons aligned. The countdown to Earth's eradication had begun. Mara's gaze hardened. She dug into the cracked plating over EXO-1's chest, searching through glowing strands of circuitry, ignoring the searing heat. She found what she hoped for, a neural interface port. Archaic, almost forgotten, a connection point for a human mind. Her breath trembled, the prototype's ember-like eyes brightened, just barely, as though understanding her intention. The fleet charged its weapons. The world braced for extinction. Mara closed her eyes, placed her palm over the port, and whispered, "Let me in." The core accepted her. Light swallowed everything. The galaxy held its breath as the human fleet moved through the outer rim, systems once considered safe now aware of an unstoppable presence. Alien sensors recorded movements with awe and fear, scanning calculations repeatedly, unable to reconcile the fluidity, the adaptability, the intelligence displayed by a species they had long underestimated. In the void, battle simulations were no longer exercises, they were warnings. Every engagement that humans entered became a lesson in anticipation, improvisation, and the relentless application of knowledge. Where others relied on numbers, the human relied on comprehension. Where others sought dominance through power, he commanded respect through ingenuity. Planets that had witnessed raids, occupations, or diplomatic coercion now trembled at reports of human involvement. Entire star systems reassessed alliances, realizing that humanity's capacity to turn disadvantage into strength was not myth, but reality. Every encounter, every strategic maneuver, revealed a species whose moral depth and tactical intelligence intertwined seamlessly. Producing outcomes that defied expectation, the human observed from the bridge of the flagship, eyes scanning the void with measured calm. Each fleet approaching was met not with blind aggression but with foresight, a methodical understanding of the enemy's psychology, technology, and instinctive tendencies. In every engagement, humans shaped the battlefield, bending chaos into opportunity, converting threats into advantage. Back on inhabited worlds, humans continued to thrive, their culture and knowledge expanding silently, a counterpoint to the chaos that threatened lesser species. Alien observers documented the phenomenon with growing concern. Humans adapted, they learned, and they endured in ways that suggested an inexhaustible resilience. Every challenge, every confrontation, became a catalyst for ingenuity rather than destruction. By the time the last of the alien warships disengaged, retreating to their borders, the human had already anticipated the next wave of possibilities. Defensive grids were strengthened, communication networks optimized, and fleets prepared, not for retaliation, but for survival and mastery. The galaxy had glimpsed human capability, and even the most advanced civilizations understood that their assumptions had been shattered. In the stillness that followed, the human looked to the stars, the expanse of the universe stretching infinitely, full of unknowns yet no longer intimidating. Humanity had proven that intelligence, courage, and defiance could bend the cosmos itself. The galaxy would remember, and somewhere, quietly, he whispered to the void, "We are not done yet."